Let's talk about the Japanese here. They have probably the most powerful force to begin the game. And let me get in a little closer here. Sorry about the shaking of the camera making you ill. There's often a great naval battle somewhere down here or here. If Japan decides they need to get rid of the British and the Americans early in the Pacific before they send the rest of their fleet to come and get them. And if they manage to catch them, there's a great battle here where Japan has a slight advantage. You can see there's carrier ships, some very large, they've got one of each type, battleship, carrier, sub, and cruisers. Got 2 cruisers here, they've got battleship and a cruiser, they've got another one over here. So they have a very large presence in the Pacific, and it could go well for them. It often does, but again, the US is very scary in the long run as they can just build and build and build. And they sometimes zig high, sometimes zag low, sometimes go in the middle. Sometimes they ignore them completely and focus in the Atlantic. We'll talk about the US later though. So this is the only territory that starts the game contested. There's a presence of the US and evenly matched against the Japan, so that's in the Solomon Islands. That's the initial hotspot, the only area that starts contested. It's controlled by Japan, but the Americans have a landing there. You can see they have a reasonable number of air units. There's the Caroline Islands, supports a famous base. I'm not the historical expert, but Larry is. I've got some in the Philippines and some on the eastern part of China, and then there's a number in Manchuria. And you can see these oil-rich islands are a must to protect. They're fairly vulnerable to attacks from the British. So these ships are generally here to squash the Australians. And then another major focus of Japan, again, they are hindered by the limitation of only 9 orders in a round. They could break the treaty with the Soviets and attack and suffer the stress. That is always a risk because there's all these juicy resources up here. Some more oil, which Japan is always a little bit oil starved. There's even an industry there which they could take on, and they only have 1 foothold, which builds 2 can build 2 units. And so it's kind of a pain for them to have to build all their units here and then bring them over to the land. So if they did break the treaty with Russia, they'd have another factory there to then team up and squish Russia. Squish isn't a very historical term, but so be it. So you can see China here. They could head. China is surprisingly difficult to eliminate despite their small forces. And if they do, they can manage to push their way to India. A lot depends on how much strength the British put in India. Oftentimes, since there's the Himalayas here, the British often push into Burma, and it's a matter of defending Burma. You can see this carrier here They could also coordinate a landing to India or vice versa, where they're defending these islands down here, and they could also try and catch that fleet over there, or sail all the way to Africa and do some landings there for some interesting alternate history. There's a number of islands that don't have any strategic value but could serve as air bases or landing spots to make their way. It is very difficult to get a foothold. If you could throw everything you have at Alaska and still get pushed out, it's very, very difficult to get a foothold on North America. That's about it for now. I think I'll stop and talk about the Allies in a separate video. But now that the units are on the board, you can sort of understand a little bit more about the quantity of units involved